everything is coming through clear. So we have about 6 minutes before we get started, and we're going to go ahead and push this stream live. And I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone here. And this is a simulcast, so it's actually happening on all subsequent stations of Secret Energy, YouTube, Instagram, and the rest of the networks. And so that's great. So I would advise anyone that is just joining in, take a moment, take a good stretch, gather yourself, realize that you have arrived, you made it, you're not late, you're on time. We're actually going to give about 5 more extra minutes again for it to breathe a bit, and for anyone who was jumping into the conversation today, that they would actually have an opportunity to catch it from the beginning. This presentation will also be archived on YouTube. So at any point, if you want to go and check it out, then you can feel free to do so. Yeah, so we're going to get started here in just a moment. Also, if someone could type in the chat here, I guess this is in Zoom. We're also broadcasting on YouTube. If you're hearing everything clear on that side also, that would be great just to know here in the studio. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to play a little bit of hold music here, and then we'll be ready to go in just a moment.
This is the most complicated one I've ever seen, by far. See, this...
Wholeness and balanced vibration. Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations Tribe. All right, Tribe. We have a few extra minutes that we're going to go ahead and take here just to allow everyone to not only dial into the space today, but to get prepared for our initial event, which is Sustainable Metaverse. I'm going to actually get in today and discuss not only our new DAO, but also some of the amazing events that we have coming up. But first, actually, we're going to discuss a bit of the origins of Secret Energy and this project so that everyone can get familiar with who we are and what we've created in the space. And so if you could just give me a quick moment, I'm going to go ahead and set the lines here so that way we don't get any sudden outbursts. And then I'll also ask you as the participant to take a moment and take a deep breath for yourself. It's always good to just take those breaths. They're free. Allow yourself to center into the space and to know that you're definitely in the right place. If it's a Saturday, this is the best place that I would believe you could be, especially in these times, because you'll not only be educating yourself, you'll be hearing about some really amazing things, and you'll be linking with a lot of incredible people because the Secret Energy Network is worldwide. We are in our 14th year. I actually did the calculation today, which is quite amazing, and we're looking forward to what we're going to be bringing next. So I'm going to go ahead and set my line here. All right. All right, here we go. Okay, so again, it's great to see everyone. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right into this. I think that we've had a bit of time to digest. It's about 10 minutes after the hour. And as I mentioned, this is archived. It will also be broadcasting in quite a few places, even now simultaneously. But we do ask if there's something here that piques your interest, that when this is complete, that you share the link with your friends. And if there is any kind of like or subscribe or any kind of button like that hanging around, I heard that it does something. So maybe you want to push it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to first start talking about really a metaverse just in itself. As you see, I did include an image on the thumbnail, and there's a person there with the VR goggles on. But incidentally, VR is a new addition to the metaverse. However, the metaverse in itself has been around since the beginning of any time you have groups together that are solely concentrating or universally concentrating on something specifically. So when we can think of that in a gaming arena, obviously Minecraft is a metaverse. Roblox is a metaverse. Call of Duty is also a metaverse. So many of these game systems and communities are already metaverses. And so when we discuss this topic, we're not just saying in relation to just cryptocurrency, but also overall a brand new trend that has arisen where people get together and they start creating a community around what they love. So our challenge today is to actually be able to succinctly explain how Secret Energy is actually a sustainable metaverse, because in taking a step back, we have to still ask, in a community, what really allows a community to thrive. And I always believe that that's actually sustainability. It's actually empowering each member of the community to do something that the rest of the community finds is valuable. So you can then see how many of the current metaverses really don't check all the boxes because it's kind of like an endeavor that's built by sometimes the developers to not only create a project that is going to be for profit, but to just kind of not think beyond that project by itself. Like starting to think about the well-being of the actual person that is participating. How many times are they utilizing this tool? How much time is it taking? All these things we can kind of layer as sustainable. And so what we're doing here is we're going to examine for a minute, like what boxes would you need to check if you were to introduce a sustainable metaverse? And I actually have those 3 boxes already checked because I kind of went over everything in life and then some. And I said, well, if you can really get everything in life into as few categories as possible, what will those categories be? And I did try to get it down to 1 category. It wasn't possible. 2 categories, it wasn't possible. But 3, it actually went in. I'm sure there could be an extra 4. Somebody is going to say on the line, well, you forgot this. So just remember, I do believe that there's always like 4. But in this, I was just trying to keep it down to the least amount of as possible. And that came into 3 catchy words. And I call those words God, love, and money. And in fact, I did an entire Instagram series on that. And it was actually pretty awesome. I'm going to be loving to start season 2 of God Love Money. But it just basically says that in the core fundamentals of a human being, there is first the deity, or the spiritual aspect of the being's growth, the metaphysical nature to their existence. It's like the driver to everything that you don't know you're going to go through yet, but it just keeps you going. And then there is, of course, love. Like, it's that place that if we didn't have any of, we would just be just so desolate and so wretched. Just love in itself is something that we generally love to receive. And we also could do better at learning how to actually give it so that more can actually receive it. But let's all admit that the more love you can get, the better off you'll be. Show some love. And then there's this new integer that just recently popped up called money. Actually, it doesn't seem rather recent. It actually seems like it's been going on since the beginning of time. But this thing that allows you to actually either be able to change your lifestyle, to go different places, to do many different things, at least now. Now, of course, there's many that know how to get by. They can really hippie and nomad their way into France and every other place in the universe. But for those that are not so brave, they need money, right? So money was a big thing. So that summarized for me personally in my own quest or venture. If I created something, what I ultimately would want it to tackle is those 3, starting with spirituality first. So as you know, I'm really in on the metaphysics. This is actually, for those that are just being invited here today or just seeing us today, this is actually a spiritual community. We're definitely not ashamed to say it. We feel like that if you figure out what's going on inside, then it really prepares you for everything going on around you and not before. So you should probably focus on yourself. We have a term that's called inner stand. And what that means is that just internally that you actually make a stand for yourself to become the Lord and the master of your own life. And so that's what we do here. And we've been doing that for 14 years. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about how we created this sustainable community. And I'm also going to give some graphics around this too, just so, if you didn't want to keep looking at my face, then, there would be something else for you to look at. So let me go ahead and push that. So as I mentioned earlier, so there are metaverses already. And so this is not a new term. So if somebody tries to slide it by you, just be like, well, wait, by that definition, there are more metaverses. And what we're talking about is we're actually talking about becoming a sustainable metaverse. But in our world, we don't like to talk about that and then collect everybody's even funds or belief and all of that, and then try to do it. Or from our world, we want to do it first and then introduce it to everyone. So that's why it's like year 14 for us, and we're finally done. No, I'm joking. But a lot of it is actually done, as you'll see here today, and it actually works because that's another thing we wanted to test it out. And then now we want to bring it to humanity, and it just so happens that there's this new thing that came along around it's actually quite old, but 2017 was pretty much the major introduction to it, and that is, of course, cryptocurrency. And I just find that in this whole process of my own personal growth and the community's growth, that everything that we're supposed to do just kind of rolls out when it's time. And so it's great that cryptocurrency, and more importantly, the DAO is here, because it's in the exact vibration of what we want to continuously create based on what we've already seen. So first, I really want to say that we are experts at building real communities. That's very important to know, just for anyone that's looking into this amazing honoring, some would say this project, et cetera. And just to know that this is not our first rodeo. And in many other projects that we've actually seen on the blockchain, they've tried to create communities and then rally everyone then around the idea. Not everyone, but probably 90% of those projects. Here, it's a bit different. It's exactly opposite. We have our ideals, we have our core group and our team and our family, and we're finding as we keep going further and further into the future that others are gaining those same ideals based on the things that have actually happened in the world and the new disposition that we find ourselves in as a race, a species, all the way around. And so this is the time where, for us specifically, we feel like that the more allies, the more friends, the more knowledge and wisdom that we have, the more powerful we'll all become. So experts in building real communities. I do want to invite anyone that is here on the line today. I will share this link here inside of the Zoom, and then someone will share it inside of YouTube, that if you wanted to see more of an extensive timeline on kind of what we've been going through, Also, like, it could be updated. It kind of goes to, I believe, 2020 or something like that. You can actually check out the link that we've just sent, and it's actually the timeline of Secret Energy. It lets you know a little bit more about the origins, give you a step-by-step on how we really came into existence from the start to probably like 2 years ago. So a deep dive of who we are can be found there just from a topological and a timeline level. So as I mentioned, we're at 13, 14 years of service now, service to the community. And in this case, my first venture into this was actually the authorship of this particular book called The Code to the Matrix, which was my last will and testament to the world. It was a secret of coding that I found within the English language. And I was on my way to something totally different, and I was just asked to leave that message with humanity. And so I put this book together and I published it for free because I was just doing what I was told so I can get to my next phase. And needless to say, the book actually went viral. I did actually leave my information in the back of the book, so lots of people started calling me or texting me and emailing me about this book. And my heart really went into just the response from the community, and I decided to take my tech background, which was something that I had actually let go at that point, and start creating tools to bring this community together. And it actually started off with this website, which is now what we could say is a cult classic, meaning that it is officially archived, but this is the original Resistance. We actually ranked #1 on Google for years for the keyword, the Resistance. So you can imagine how hard we were going in. And everyone here, wow, I mean, you can't even limit what happened here in words. There are many of the beings that shared this space initially with us that are actually still with us. This is 13 years ago of hardcore deep dive. Some would call it conspiracy, but we always made sure that the actual knowledge we were receiving started to obey a blueprint that anyone could use that allowed you to really be able to distinguish truth from falsehood by utilizing your heart. And so we were in the space giving you all the knowledge and wisdom that you could to really gain bearing on what you were doing. And that is, if you want to say humble, that is our humble beginnings. So today, we've actually moved forward with a massive plan that we feel was commissioned when we began the Resistance, and that was to educate in a multidisciplinary. So not just in metaphysics, but to everything that would be important in a person's life. And as I said, that took us into, obviously, metaphysics, that took us into understanding self more, so that way we could really love others. And that took us also into finances, because let's just face it, these organics are a bit expensive. You know, all these things to clean your body, some of that stuff is not cheap. A new way of life that, you know, is just your own corner of the galaxy may require you to buy some land rather than that initial finding your community. So having resources and knowing what to do with those resources is also something we felt was equally as vital. I also wanted to mention that we were always fertile for addressing alternative ideas. It just became the way. We realized that a lot of the stuff that we were fed was just like taken for face value. And what we really needed to do was maybe look at everything, maybe turn it 180 degrees upside down and see if you can find some truth. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that became a massive body of work. Even right now on YouTube, we actually have 700 plus videos. By the way, I say we a lot because I love to speak in a collective. It also sounds like you're not alone. It's like, yo, we, like, who is we? This is we. So we put all this together because you could imagine, like, if you can't do 700 videos talking to yourself. Okay, let's just put it like that. Like, after about 50 videos, you know, I think I got to 20 and I was getting a little shaky. And I was like, oh, this is only 6 views. I mean, what are we doing here? This guy over here is digging in his nose and he's got 2 million views. What am I doing wrong? So, you know, there was this moment where I realized that, hey, you know, you really have to understand how much of this is really your responsibility versus how much is the collective responsibility. And so we breathe air. That's also another element. So if you think you're doing it alone, wait until air decides to not be in it with you today. There's the sun. There's so many other things. So it's always good to see things more expansive, especially if you've been feeling a little lonely lately. So the we. And so we have now 700 plus videos on YouTube with an average runtime of 2.5 hours, maybe 3. And so there was a massive body of knowledge. And I was challenged at one point to put that body of knowledge actually into a curriculum. And because the body of knowledge kept growing, so did the curriculum. And needless to say, we ended with, or it's never an end to something like this, but we have a massive body or a learner management system for a multidisciplinary metaphysical venture. That's just been in all this process. So in this growth, we've decided to take a mindful approach at everything. We realize a lot of this knowledge and wisdom can be useful at certain points, can be destructive in certain areas. And so we wanted to be more mindful about the actual curriculum. Like, you just don't go to 12th grade is what we're saying. You need to know ABCs first. And so that's what the university, which is called, became. And so that was a big move for us. And then once the university began, I started deep diving into systems that were going to give us better metaphysical metrics, I called it. And this is basically that you see there's a lot of different systems. There's human design, there's the Enneagram, there's astronomy, there's astrology, there's different systems that are supposed to give us more information about who we are and why we're here. And so we were pouring through all of that too. Once I guess the network reached about 15,000 of us, that meant there were 30,000 eyes. And so we were all like reporting in on what's out there. And every time we set an agenda collectively, we pursued that until it's finished. And we finally came up with a system that I dubbed Enneology. And Enneology is the exploration of your uniqueness. It is rooted in the most ancient systems, and it's highly accurate. I think eventually I will bring this around to an app. But before then, we actually had to create what you would put in that app first, which is all of the data. And so we launched Enneology, and I'm happy to announce that that's homegrown inside of the site, where there's a system that when a user signs up, it starts giving them quests to go on based on who they truly are. And that's constantly vetted by some of our more private groups, such as Ambassador Training, as we go through the process and keep flushing out all the information and knowledge about who we are, which again is endless. But that was a major tool for us. And so I realized at that point that we were almost like developers, but for softwares that humanity really needs. And so even simple things we would develop, like in this, since again, we realized we were dealing with a lot of information, I decided to create this application that goes through all of the closed caption data inside of all the videos. And then when you type something, it would serve up the most relevant video based on that. So to me, that's a very simple application. The developers, they were kind of pulling their teeth. I'm like, come on, guys, this is simple. But it was an extreme use case. And even at this stage, I think I'll actually probably deploy this publicly for other websites that are especially still working with the WordPress ecosystem to begin to create even playlists that can be searched by people. And that way you can actually clean up your data a bit. But anyway, we began to innovate these softwares and these other technologies. What we also started doing was we realized that there was a lot of work that we needed to do personally with our body. And that was an entire quest for everyone here, and still remains the quest. And that is how to regenerate. That's a big thing. And so what we did was we put together over time some of the most incredible products that you'll actually find on the internet related to spiritual growth, physical wellness, etc. And many of those products we actually developed or R&D'd ourselves, homegrown here in Spirit Tech Labs. And so the first advent, just so you understand how this started, because the last thing we wanted was to create a store in the beginning. In fact, I was just like still trying to glide off the planet and just doing what I could for humanity while I was on my way. As you can see, I'm still here. So it became a point where when people were asking me, oh, well, what's the best supplement to use for this? Or how can I go on this cleanse? And, what should I use? And we used to have this list that we were passing around. And then after a while, that list became so refined. I was like, man, let me just reach out to the people who supply this stuff and see if we could kind of come into some type of agreement, and then we'll have it all in one place. So that was 10 years ago. Now we actually have 120 products inside the Secret Energy store. Amazing stuff with the one requirement: it's got to work or it doesn't hit the store. And we also were able to actualize many things that were known in the community but needed some personal pioneering to get done, such as real monatomic gold, not some of the alternatives that are available on the internet, but real monatomic gold and actually getting the equipment and things that are necessary to create that kind of stuff and really pioneering it until it was complete. So Secret Energy right now has about 6 products that it has pioneered and researched and developed from scratch. It also has some pretty interesting spiritual devices that it will release in the near future. And so our R&D facilities are very robust. I also wanted to mention that in this process of creating things, there wasn't just an agenda to create more products. There was actually an agenda to create a revenue stream for members of the platform that wanted to begin to use our affiliation. And I just wanted to show this very briefly just so you can see how that's been progressing. But basically, we wanted to create a form of income for our users and create a circular economy. That's eventually what it went into. And this came later on. I'll explain this a little bit in a minute, but it was just about my adventure into gamification when I first was introduced to cryptocurrency and what I learned there. But needless to say, and let me just remove myself out of the image here, is we were able to create a economy around the products that were in the system. And then we were able to, because we were producing the products as we choose to continue to do, offer exceptionally higher commissions than most ventures and other companies that are out there. So in this case, if you notice that you can actually see on the Secret Energy website, there is there's some economic widgets. So not only our protocol, which is ohms inside of Secret Energy running, this is awarding for mindfulness. You could see the top people for this week, this month. And then also our affiliation, which is actual cash. So not just points, but cash, and how those that are using the system is progressing with the system. And the system is so flush, it doesn't actually require you to go out and to try to sell a product. It actually is designed on you just inviting a user to look at any content that is on the site, period. So if you see a nice video, automatically inside of that video, there's a link that you can use. It'll share it to social media. If a person clicks it and then comes inside the site, then they're already signed up underneath you if they choose to join the site. And when they make a financial transaction, if they choose to make one, then you get a percentage of that financial transaction. That works ad infinitum. So it's a very strong way to actually build what I just call the passive aggressive income, especially since I'm seeing that those are using it are really able to benefit from how the system functions. But it's, again, an insight into the mindfulness, because yes, we do all need to sustain ourselves in some way, shape, or form. However, if you're now selling products again and your friends are looking at you like, oh man, he's got into another MLM, then that's not going to shine too well on you, and it's not going to shine well on us. So we design what we call unobtrusive marketing, which is a system that allows you to share what's in the site. And then if someone actually comes into the system, we also feel like that they came in because of you. So we should be rewarding you for that. And that's also in one of my future builds where I'm just going to talk about how social networks and engagements really should actually be paying you, because you're actually spending your time, and your time does actually have a value. But it does mean that that network has to be configured the proper way to be able to extract that value and then take it somewhere else and then actually do something with it to be able to return it back to you. This is also a spiritual principle. Many people actually have a lot of what's called pent up dharma, meaning they're naturally great people. They haven't racked up too many karma points, but they don't really know how to unlock their gifts or their dharmas to the world so that they can start seeing that actualize in the physical form. And so that's a process that we also teach. It's a process that we're also going through constantly. So it's very interesting to see when your well starts running over and how that actually happens with you understanding more about your uniqueness. So you see how if we were just, let's say, a financial outfit, then it would kind of be off limits for us to talk about that. Also, if we were just a spiritual outfit, it would be kind of off limits for us to talk about the financial thing. So that's what I mean by multidisciplinary. And we've always held to that. Some people have come in and been kind of put off by it, left, and then came back again and realized that you would need something that was totally cohesive. So I'm going to keep going in this. So this wealth building process is something that we do have at our forefront also. So it's not something that we ignore. And for our site, you can always know that if someone comes in, if they don't have anything, great. because we can get them something. This is an input-output experience. So if you're coming in and you got it all already and you're like, just shut up, take my money, show me exactly what I should start with, then there's a design there for you to get started. But if you're coming in like, look, I've taken a couple hits, really my pockets are hurting, where can I get started with this? Then there is a zero startup. And so that to us was very important for us to actually have something that has like an input output actually happening within the community. Then we started venturing out further into humanitarian ventures. This is sometimes going on not necessarily with the awareness of the virtual tribe, but that there's also a physical aspect to Secret Energy and its endeavors and what it's engaged in the local communities. And what we began to tackle is we began to tackle the education and the overall well-being of inner city youth. And this is just across the globe, but primarily inside of Georgia. Actually, we have a module that we're continuously scaling. And what it does in a partnership that we've been able to make not only with DJI, but also a few other companies that are actually inside of Georgia that have taken on this venture and this initiative. And that is to not only bring in robotics, but also to bring in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into local communities, starting with DJI's EP Core units, which actually are extremely amazing for the educational platform that they offer within the robot. And so what this has been about is this has been about making sure that the advancement of technology remains inclusive. As you can see, Secret Energy here and some of our affiliations that have been pushing on this project with us. But this is actually homegrown also by one of my best friends in life, and that is Lemuel LaRoche with Chess and Community. And he's a real on the ground guy. So for me, I'm like in the air and he's on the ground. And we always say that between that, then we got the whole thing covered. So just understand that Secret Energy is engaged in many humanitarian efforts. And our next venture in this, which I won't talk too much about now, but is actually an imagination station where we allow youth to actually expand their imagination, utilizing some of the GAN interfaces and the diffusion models that we've been able to acquire, especially in relation to art. So I wanted to speak a little bit about how in game theory, if you may, or how I even came into the cryptocurrency space, just so you can kind of understand my disciplinary, because again, this is the project that we're speaking on today is related to also our NFT and the launch of our DAO. And so in 2017, I did emerge into the space. I did have an opportunity to do that. I think it was in 2015. I actually was in the onboarding process to the cryptocurrency space and kind of stopped midstream when I got totally confused about what I was doing. There was very little education then. And even for me coming from a technical background, I did not understand how to buy what would have been 5,000 of these things called Bitcoin. I remember having the actual screen open and me stuck at what I know now is the transaction screen. And I just left it open because I didn't know what to do. And I kept saying, I'm going to get back to that screen. I'm going to get back to that screen. And then somehow, at some point in the future, the computer shut off and that screen was gone. I guess that 5,000 Bitcoin would have been a little useful right now. But needless to say, that was me in 2015. By the time I came around in 2017, I seemed to catch that first, I'm not sure if it was the first, but at least the second wave of the crypto buzz. It even felt spiritual. Like there was something going on that I needed to know. When it came across, I was like, there's something about this. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt the energy. Some of my friends, well, I lost those friends because they were just like, look, we're like ultra spiritual and cryptocurrency is not, and you're not our friend anymore. So, I kept going with it. And eventually I realized what it was. And it was about that for thousands of years, we have had no opportunities to be our own bank. We've had no opportunities to create our own economies, and we definitely haven't had any opportunity to put our own acronym or logo on any kind of coin. And the sheer opportunity of that would be one you probably wouldn't want to pass up on. Maybe your kids would be angry and upset. They say, well, Dad, you were around when Ethereum came out and we don't have any? I hate you, Daddy. I didn't want to be succumb to something like that. So anyway, it was a thing that I felt a vibe with, and I kept going. But unfortunately, in 2017, you can probably line up every single cryptocurrency that was coming out then on a wall, close your eyes, and throw a dart. And whatever you landed on, if you invested in it, it was going to make money. That is just what was happening. But making money, that kind of became a word because it didn't mean that you actually collected that money. It meant that you did this thing we called HODL. and you watched it go all the way up your dreams, and then you watch your dreams go all the way down, because there is an actual trade, a skill that is called like day trading and the stock market, et cetera. And you would need that to understand how to invest, collect your profits, et cetera, properly. So many of us that came in 2017 that didn't realize that got taught that lesson. So whatever was lost, we just call that tuition. And as long as you learn something, if you lost a lot of money, hopefully you learned a big lesson. There was always one lesson: never invest more than you can refuse to lose. And I always follow that lesson today. I would advise others to also do that. However, I don't think many of us are really good losers either. So it doesn't mean that you're all happy about the money that you've lost. So needless to say, that was the space with cryptocurrency and the vibe with cryptocurrency. So by the time we reached 2018, I realized that, okay, I kind of woke up from my dopamine high of cryptocurrency, and that I needed to really educate myself. And so I took it all the way back to the basic fundamentals of what not just blockchain is, but really participation inside of a community, which in this case is called game theory, right? It's kind of a crazy word to me because it sounds so gamey. It sounds like it's not important because it's a game. But meanwhile, entire societies run on game theory. The gentleman who was the first to really publish it, because game theory is actually existing inside of most tribes, especially indigenous tribes. But the first person to actually publish the game theory won a Nobel Peace Prize for it. It was that groundbreaking. And so I will say that game theory basically exists on the components that everyone inside of the game is the value. So it's the same thing that WhatsApp does. There's a bunch of people using WhatsApp, so the value of WhatsApp is all the people using it. So WhatsApp can be free because there's still a lot of people using it. And I'm sure some people are wondering, well, how is WhatsApp making money? Well, I guess that would be in the privacy policy if you choose to read it. But what's needless to say, the more numbers that you have inside of something, that actually becomes the value. So we're coming from an ancient society who the more children we actually had, the more valuable the society was. It's almost opposite to that right now. People are pretty scared to have children, or too many, and don't necessarily look at their children as resources that can increase the value of the household these days. They kind of almost even look at them as liabilities. But if you can imagine, the bigger the tribe, the more can be done. And most importantly, since everyone comes out with a uniqueness, like your fingerprint, since everyone comes out with a uniqueness, it just always means that there's a gift coming out that is needing to be unpacked. And the rest of the tribe just dives in on all of their skills to figure out how to get this one new being to actually unlock their gift. And then when they combine their gifts with everybody else's gift, they all become more powerful because it becomes the sum total at that point, acting as one. So that is really game theory in itself. And then the value and the currency and the circulation that goes on within that kind of endeavor is the theories. Okay, so for me, I just kind of dove into game theory. And when I finally came up for air, I realized that it would work with anything, that it didn't need to be cryptocurrency. It didn't need to be anything. And so because anything that was something specific, it just needed to be something that you can denote as valuable. And also at that stage, we were in 2018. So the legal arena of cryptocurrency was a little shady, a little hazy. There wasn't a lot of laws carved around. There were carved around the space. We didn't know if a lot of things were going to be retroactive. So Secret Energy already being a venture that was very successful in many ways because of the energy and the intelligence that was put in it, we didn't want to make it fail because of something that we didn't really know about. So we chose not to actually create a coin and a token in 2018 and to go forward like many people were encouraging us to do, and to just create a cryptocurrency for that reason. I didn't want to actually get into the gray area of the legal bindings, but I also wanted to go forward with gamification, and that's how ohms actually began. Ohms began on the aspect of realizing that if we're rewarding users for mindfulness, as we call it, that means doing things in a platform that actually do drive the growth of the platform, then there is a value there. And once we determine what that value is for us, then we can then extend that value to the user. And that's what we do. So at this point, there are 11,599,000 ohms in circulation. I would love to take a moment to get you a number on also how many ohms have been redeemed, because it is quite a bit also. And so this just means over time, since every ohm has the value of approximately 1 penny in relation to correlation to any kind of financial system, then there is that investment in the people, and we redeem that investment constantly. And this has already been running for 2 to 3 years inside of our own protocol, so not on the blockchain. And so that is our experience as far as gamification, cryptocurrency, and blockchain. And then also we took on an additional venture to begin to educate, because we found that, yeah, there was not only this learning curve, but coming in without the proper education could be a financial disaster. So we started putting together educational modules. We're now actually more of going into the venture of creating things that are simplified to educate children about the future of finances. But that is actually our venture within cryptocurrency up until this point, until around January, I think of this year, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe around December. We realized that we were at a turning point or a fork in the road with Secret Energy. This is a massive venture. There's many attachments to Secret Energy. And as you go forward with what we're doing on any level, you'll see that, oh my goodness, they're doing that too. And so what happened is that I realized that we had gotten to a point where it was ready. And this was after like 12 years. It's like, okay, it's finally done. We've debugged it. It looks great. People are having a great time. It's changing their lives. How can we scale this? Especially since in 12 years, we've never gotten one call from a real investor. So it doesn't mean that this was like something that, you know, everybody was just waiting on and that it was just the next unicorn in everybody's eyes. It was really just something that was kind of underground, except for the people that knew about it. So we were thinking, okay, well, if we can either keep things the way that they are, but we can't create anything new because we're at yield, or we scale it. Is there a way that we can scale this entire venture? It was a simple question. And so not even to make it complex, no wishful thinking, none of that, just can we scale this? And what I came into was, yes, but the only way that we would be able to do that is if we entered into the cryptocurrency space. For it to be fair for everybody else also that has been along on this venture, for it to be fair for me, who's put so much time and energy into this. I mean, it's also because, you know, you bring on investors and then now the investors, they want a percentage, they want say so, they want different things. How would that make the community feel? But then also when the bills come in, you know, and the community is not supporting, how does that make me feel? So there was always this, you know, this give or take or this yin or yang that always had to go along with this. And that's why I said when the DAO came in, it removed that component, because it's actually removing the component of a rather defunct financial system and monetary policy. And so, but that's not how it started for me. I started investigating along with the team that we just called the Dream Team. Is cryptocurrency going to work for us? And in this process, now this is after me kind of coming out of the crypto space, I actually hired some mentors in the space to teach me what I needed to know. And I thought that they were actually going to teach me how to code contracts, but instead they just kept drilling me more and more about monetary policy, and that I had to be able to actually explain the dynamics and the fundamentals of a circular economy before I could ever think about minting a coin. And in some of those meetings, I was thinking of just about others who have minted coins and haven't done any of that, and why I was even wasting my time. But I also felt like from the mentors that I was with that they were divinely sent, that they were really trying to grant me a mantle from the Bitcoin gods, if you may. And so through this process, I started realizing that, yes, there was more to it. And instead of launching, it was more of like, let's take a step back and understand all of this. So I took a deep dive into the DAO. And then finally, I got around to NFTs. Now, it's interesting that if you came in at 2017, just how fast this industry is moving, it almost felt like when the NFT started that you were already an old man and everybody was so fascinated by these NFTs. Now, mind you, this was only like a year and a half ago. So everybody's so fascinated about these NFTs, but you were into legacy or something that, you know, that you could demark as being maybe the more safer investment, right? However, that was predominantly due to just the overall energy around how a non-fungible asset was being treated. It was just being treated in some respect as a JPEG or a money grab, when really what it is actually the actual certificate and token of participation and ownership of something. And I found also in game theory that it talked about that if a person doesn't feel like they have really a stake or a part of something, even if they say that they're the most devout in it, they can't be. There's something that happens subconsciously when you give someone the actual credential or the credibility to now act in that role. And that's what in a DAO, a non-fungible token is it actually becomes the integer of value within that entity. And as the entity's value increases, so does that. And generally, though, the value starts to transcend your feeling, especially if it has a good utility, you're feeling that you need to actually liquidate the initial asset that gives you access to that value. So what I'm saying is that when a person sells an NFT, it's like they're selling their part of the corporation, if you may, and they may be selling it for this little amount, 2 ETH, 3 ETH, but maybe what they're selling, if it's a real project, is something that is worth 100 ETH, 200 ETH. Only time can tell. And what a utility is supposed to be something that you can begin to extract some of the value that is accruing within this asset to something else that is also valuable to you. And so in the cryptocurrency space, utilities became Ponzi schemes, as we've seen now with Terra and many other algorithmically set processes of extracting value from another person that is just put in value, and then also extracting value from assumptions of what the value is to be in the future. So just so you can understand also, many of the business investors, they are looking for companies to invest in that they can get a solid valuation for, so they can borrow money on that valuation. So let me let you understand that just a little bit. They will maybe look and assess your company and say, I wonder if I can get this company appraised at 26 million, give this guy 5 million for a part of it, get the loan for 26 million. And you see what I mean? So it's more of like a leveraging game than it is somebody's actually introduced or interested in your project. And many people that were a part of that first .com wave experienced that the hard way. They kind of had to sell their babies, literally, because the venture funds and capitalists that actually invested in their ideas had only the ending goal of selling it to something that was more bigger, so that they can make good on some of the loans that they were beginning to default on. And it's a rolling scale, so it may not be your business that's not in profit, but another venture that they've engaged in that isn't. And so it's a very dirty world, is what I'm saying, and it involves a lot of people getting hurt. So for us, we understood all of that, and that was what we did not want to create. And so again, when we start looking at the DAO, we realize that yes, we have something that's going to allow us to really go horizontal, but in the pace of what a new technology would need to go at in order to be completely introduced and to ultimately become completely autonomous. Because just so you should know, a DAO is generally something that is running without any human intervention. And our mentorship, which is actually a strong mentorship by SuperDAO, shouts out to SuperDAO, has always educated just in the way of beginning the process, so ultimately you can become a complete DAO. And this fits in our goals of something running long after the founders have left the planet, if we don't crack into regeneration within the next 20 to 30 years. So I'm just saying, as a designer of something, you would always want it to survive long after maybe your own demise or your own death or your own departure. But to try to find something, even your own children, that could operate at that capacity is very difficult. Many parents leave their companies to their children thinking that the company will be safe or be run the same way they run it, and find that that is not the case. The DAO offers that not only because it can do that digitally, meaning it can actually get committees and councils together and allow them to submit proposals and begin to vote about the future of what is being created. It also has a way of the original founders being able to encode within it the original principles. Also, a big part of the DAO is the charter and the manifesto itself. If you want to understand from a legal level why it is that so many ventures end up kind of becoming gobbled up by the same capitalistic system, and it's generally because the actual framework or structure, legal structure that they're actually built on leaves them prone to that happening. The DAO being in itself the original legal structure formulated for indigenous tribes, just so you understand the origin of the DAO is not with technology, but actually in trying to create a legal structure for indigenous tribes who cannot abide by the current laws of the land. Then we've come to see actually that the DAO gives the ability, again, to not only go horizontal, but it also gives the ability to issue these non-fungible tokens, if you may, to every member. And then it also allows them those members to come into an agreement that is now a private sanctum, an agreement, an oath or charter that says, hey, when you come into this or when you acquire this, you're acquiring it based on this understanding that you agree to this. And what that does is it opens up, again, a private network where what you're doing inside of your network, what your protocols are up to and what your economy is up to is not the personal business of the public sector. Okay, so the DAO is a force field for lack of better terms, against legal onslaught. So right now, what we've been able to allow everyone to gain access to, because I'm going to talk a little bit about, because we're only actually a week away from our quest. I want to show you what that really consists of and how to get more information about this project, especially for those who like to read everything, especially if you're making sound financial decisions these days, and especially if you don't just want to take my word for it. So I'm going to share a link, and then someone is going to also share that link inside of YouTube. And what this link is our white paper, which we've actually spent months on. And this white paper will allow you to see our manifesto. It'll also allow you to read our charter. It will also allow you to whitelist. It will also give you more details about the infrastructure of the existing platform. And it will also give you an idea through our roadmap of what our ventures are going to be as we create more utility, because utility is the big thing. If you want to understand this just properly, that in a city, there's lights, there's gas, there's utilities, and everybody knows how valuable utilities are. So since we're a city, actually, this is what I believe is going to be the future of cities, starting here within this DAO. As a city, then we need utilities that are valuable to others that are either neighboring communities, those that are actually inside of the community, and non-existing members to the community. And so if you could see that as like a business has the responsibility to create a product that people want. And if they can do that, then it sustains the business. And you can also see that people inside of the business structure are technically the members of that tribe. But again, the design is a bit different because, of course, most of the time they're not the shareholders, they're not the owners, and most of the time they're not even the boss. The thing in a DAO is it allows everybody that is a member of the DAO to actually be able to have say-so and to propose something. And this allows the organization to actually dial into what we call group wisdom. And this is just the wisdom of the people that are generally using it or are the most devout believers in it, et cetera, because their input is actually the most important in the growth of something. And so with the DAO, that gives us the ability to do that. So I've shared a link again to the white paper. Let me just turn my screen share back on because I'm going to get into some of the goodies here. So just know that the white paper is there. Our Discord, even though it's accessible, we are going live with the Discord here on, I believe it's the 22nd. And this is because we are starting the process of actually coming online with our NFT. So just give me a quick moment here. And let me shift over to here. And I'm kind of midstream at developing a landing page, but because we don't want any minting options available right now, we've been kind of making sure that everything just doesn't go public yet. But as of, let me see, what was that, Saturday? Yeah, or Friday. No, it was Friday for sure. I remember I was having a party coding an NFT contract, which is definitely not something that everybody would be interested in. But we finally went live, if you may, with our contract, even though our contract is going to go into pre-sale here in a moment. But the Warriors of Love project, and let me just explain this very briefly, is a project that is actually very dear to my heart. It actually started during some journeys that we were going through here in Costa Rica with some of the elder tribes that were coming out of different areas, the Sierra Nevadas. Also, some of my brothers that came in that were coming from Bali and different places, all with this unified force of not only the medicine, which in this case was peyote, but also just the opening heart of the family, and to start to really, really be warriors for love, just to really, really start going in on creating things that make a solidified family foundation, because that's where things are starting. And needless to say, there was a song that was called The Hummingbird People, the Warriors of Love. And it was a song that was sung, and it was just one of those songs that make you feel good. And so when we finally came around to our Genesis collection, which is what's here and available, we decided that we were going to call it the Warriors of Love. We also decided that actually it consists of 4 elements, but the first one representing the air was going to be the hummingbirds. And so now, since we had conceived the Hummingbird Warriors of Love, then we needed someone who was going to be able to actualize the visuals to it, which, you've probably seen some images here and there, but I'm not just going to kind of broadcast that everywhere right now. So my brother that's also on the platform, Sven West, has the hands of God. Okay, so let's just put it like that. And so when we came together with this conception, which actually happened here in Costa Rica, of manifesting what these hummingbirds would look like, we also decided to create an entire lure around it. And that kind of ran in tandem with me also creating some devices that I was working on anyway, that create, different fields inside of the environment. And so needless to say, we rolled all this stuff together along with all of our principles. And what we came up with was the Warriors of Love NFTs. And then also the IRL, which is in real life, giveaway of the vector equilibriums, which are actually these devices that just recently got done. This is a project that's been 3 years in the making of these physical devices. So when we came into the space, we wanted to not only bring the NFTs as a virtual, we also wanted to bring the cuboctahedrons or vector equilibriums as a physical. And so, yeah, we always go in with everything that we do. And so amazing collaboration was created. And right now we're on the cusp of launching a very small exclusive collection of hummingbird people. We call it 999 plus one. And that's actually the launch of everything for what is Creator DAO. And I'll explain that here now. And so how this is going to begin is that obviously we wanted to give the opportunity for this project to gain some traction in just the space. I've always mentioned that, still in all these years, we cannot say that we've actually been adopted yet. We didn't necessarily make a YouTube adoption, even though there's almost 200,000 subscribers over there. It's still not the million channel, Instagram, sometimes different communities, but we've always had this very unique thing about what we do. And because we're multidisciplinary, sometimes it could not be what everybody else wants to do. And so again, we've kind of been in our own lane and not really had that major adoption yet. And that's fine, because for us, we were like, well, we'd rather be adopted, if you want to use that term, when it's complete. And so now, since so many things are actually complete, we decided that, okay, this is going to be the big rollout, and we're going to do it with all the bells and whistles. And so we're going to have a massive giveaway of not only NFTs, but also IRLs. And for 3 weeks, we're going to allow everyone to go through these quests, which are all going to unlock on the same day. There will be a actual meeting about this. So if you click the link in the description of wherever you're at, and if you're not in the Luma already, you will receive notifications about each of these events. And once this starts, you're going to go through these actionables that we put together that are not only going to prepare you for being able to even receive the NFT, but also educate you in relation to certain things, just so that you won't be just, we expect that there will be some people that come in that don't know anything about this. So we want to make sure that we're being responsible and mindful about what they're getting into and how it works and the power that they have. Also, every platform that we're entering, in this case, we're in Crew 3, we're going to be the biggest project inside of the platform because we already have a community. We already have more quests than any other project inside of Crew 3, which is 83 quests. Much heart to my brother Destin, because we sat in on this one for weeks, just really carving out a choose your own adventure. So you'll be able to jump into this and actually go through the ones that you want to go through. You'll unlock experience points and you'll gain more tickets, which then go also into a raffle, which will allow you to be drawn through the process of winning an NFT, or for your tickets to be winning an NFT directly, or your tickets being entered into a raffle to be drawn so that you can actually win the NFT maybe that way. So plenty of opportunities in here and lots of fun as we go on this quest together. And it's also going to bring more recognition to this project. Also, for those that are wondering kind of what's going on with even a pre-sale of this project, just so you understand, we're launching our NFT first. There will be a pre-sale to the NFT that will take place 72 hours before the NFT. That will be for everyone that is already whitelisted. And then also, you could imagine that at some stage, and we don't want to speak too much about this, but that we are for sure going to launch a token. Those who purchase the NFT will actually be rewarded a certain amount of those tokens. But in this whole process, because again, we have strong mentorship, we know that until our utility is complete, that we should not mint any tokens, because we want the token to be used inside of the utility, inside the protocol. And it just turns out, though, we're a lot more closer to that than we thought, because we've been able to bring on some pretty cool tools that we believe that users and people in outside will actually pay or use our token to actually pay for the use of. So that's pretty far along at this stage. So what I'm going to do is that let me check my final links here. So as I mentioned, let me just show this here. So you have Secret Energy. You could check on all the stuff that we got going on here. We also have the awareness of exactly what's going on with our own protocol inside the platform. You now have access to the white paper. And I'm just kind of going over everything here just to make sure I just covered everything. As I mentioned, there are actually 9 events. So this is really a primer. It's just kind of to get everybody into even showing up for these, and also to bring some awareness around what we're about to do and what's about to be launched. Also to give you the links to what you need to be subscribed to get information about this. And so in this case, that is Luma/Secret Energy. And I'll have someone share that link. Let's do that here, because we got to imagine some will just maybe pick up this video because of the algorithm or something. So here it is here inside of the chat. Most people who are in Zoom already have it, or you wouldn't be in Zoom. So I will ask that if you share that on maybe any networks that you're looking at this stage, just in case someone wants to dial in. So what I want to do is I also wanted to keep this a dialogue somewhat rather than a monologue. I didn't want to exhaust everyone's time. I'm good for going in on 3-hour builds, but I really wanted to just scratch the surface a bit about what exactly we're doing, and also put in some fine details to when everything is going to be rolling out. As I mentioned, our NFT goes live in August 22nd. And before then, we have roughly 3 weeks of a quest that we're allowing others to go on and participate. We will be opening up our Discord in just a little bit, or it'll go live. I know some are already in there, but it'll go live in just a little bit when we get closer to the quest, which is on the 22nd. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow anyone who has questions around this project that I can answer here. Maybe there will be some things that I will not be able to speak on just from a privacy level. Many of these ideas are super fresh, and that means somebody's always trying to get a hold of something super fresh and do something with it. So we are a bit cautious on what we talk about, especially at this stage. But other than that, we are open to answering questions. And so what I want to do is, if you do have a question, there's actually moderators that are inside of the chats now, mainly YouTube and also Zoom. And if you type your question, if you could put question first, so that way we can kind of pick it out of the sea of comments that are going on there, then I will do my best to actually answer your question. This will be a very short session, so I'll try to do some rapid fire. And as I said, you know that you have the link now, and there's lots more coming, so I didn't really want to exhaust, just today, but I wanted to let you know that Secret Energy has decided to move forward as the Secret Energy Foundation. We are forming Creator DAO, which is a DAO that is centered around the propulsion of not only content creators, or what you would call influencers, but also the youth, because as it states in number 0 of our charter, and that would be the last but not least, number 0 in our charter is that we will continue to treat everyone's child as if it's our own, to finally get to a level that eventually we see everyone as our children. And I think someone would have to focus on that a little bit of what I just said, because it's not only just an awareness about where we should be at now in humanity's history, her story, and how really like we need to get grips on what's happening with our children and empowering them more. And then also just that awareness that as you keep leveling up and become more self-aware yourself, you still have that responsibility even as you're leveling up, and you may feel like, I'm up here on God mode or Supreme or whatever, that just means everybody is now your child, and you still need to come in and keep doing the maintenance. So that's 0 in our charter, not number 1, but 0 first and foremost. And that's always dear and close to my heart, and everybody that you will find here in Secret Energy and Creator DAO. So yes, questions. Let me go ahead and shift off this screen really briefly, get a little bit of water. I'm going to go ahead and check my communication device. I see that there's a question here already, but give me just one moment. Okay. All right. So the first question is, how can we get on the whitelist? And I'll show you that directly, just so for anybody that's watching this. We sent a link earlier that was related to the white paper. Let me just pull that up real quick here. And right now, we're allowing anyone that has access to the white paper to just click over here to the left where it says whitelist, and you will come to this form and you can start here. Also, inside of the Luma, you can go to the library. Actually, I think it's on the top where the links are. And I may have a different view just because I'm the moderator, but there will be links across the top inside of Luma, and you will actually see the link to the white paper, and then of course you can get the whitelist. Also, inside of the announcements, there's actually a whitelist button right here. It's clear as day. We want to make sure everybody doesn't miss it. But again, once the whitelist is over, then it goes public. And as we mentioned here, the difference is that if you're whitelisted now, then you can take part in the pre-sale. Then you can secure the NFT right away, or however many you want, and it's pretty much over. Once it goes to public sale, then based on how much attention the project attracts between now and when we launch, all those NFTs could go in a moment, which we hope happens, because that gives us the empowerment to keep going forward, even though we're going forward anyway. And if not, then it will also, they will be there, and they will be there. So yeah, it just gives you priority to actually be able to acquire your NFTs now versus potentially later on. So the next question here is, how about gold and silver backed assets and behind coins? Okay. And I can let you know some of our ideas around this, because it turns out as we form a DAO and actually begin to formulate a treasury, then we have the options to begin to propose to that treasury hybrid ways of actually beginning to secure the assets. So you may say, okay, we want to take 20% of the assets and place them in land, place them in gold, place them in silver. And that to us is much more entertaining, especially as a diversification, than just having that sometimes sitting in maybe some type of unstable asset. And so that's really what we're thinking around that, as far as being able to indemnify, I guess would be the term, some of the actual economy within things that are a lot less volatile and a bit more stable, right? So that's my answer around that. The question is, how is this pushing the consciousness forward through NFTs? So many levels. As I said before, NFTs is one thing when we're kind of looking at I don't want to name any projects or anything because, I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm just saying that there is a maximum use and there's a minimal use. And empowerment is all around NFTs because what it does is it gives the person the ability to actually have a real stake in what's being created versus in every other structure that you see, you generally don't have any stake or say so in what you're engaging in and you choose to be there nonetheless. Also, if you look at most platforms don't actually pay their users. Google may pay you 0.005 cents, but it's pretty tough to live on that. So in our world, we have created an infrastructure that meets all of the points of actually being able to bring true value. And NFT is just one of those major points at being able to give a person an actual authentic certificate of that value. Now, that question may have also be related to potentially our NFT marketplace coming in the future. Our goal is definitely not to create an open sea. We just know that we have a certain group that we're with. There's a conscious community that we're also with. And because we have such a massive network that caters to that, I think that a person would do a lot better inside of our marketplace if they had something that was catered towards that than they would in just maybe an open marketplace like OpenSea. But that's later on in our roadmap. It's not a priority for us at this stage. Also, NFTs can be digital assets. That's another thing, or are digital assets, excuse me. And digital assets are not just JPEGs. They're also courses, art. Many things can come forward as a NFT if it can be digitized, music. And so we're more interested in actually exploring those use cases of NFTs, especially within our marketplace. And what Creator DAO is also about is that you can already understand that most of the time when a person goes to create something, they have maybe the key component, but they don't have everything else that needs to be around that component, like the engine, as they call it. And what happens is, or maybe they have the engine and they don't have the rest of the other components, right? The transmission and everything else. And so what Creator DAO is Creator DAO is just that. It's actually in itself a quasi-agency that is filled with many people that have different types of talents that can collaborate with other influencers, if you may, and other creators, what we call co-creation. And this is actually some of the applications that we're implementing is what we call a toroidal economy, which is applications that allow groups of people to begin to create things together and then complete those creations rather rapidly and then bring those creations to market. And then everybody that was involved in that creation actually gaining a percentage of that creation automatically, where there needs to be no accounting and bookkeeping and auditing and all those kind of things because it's all done on the blockchain. The next question here is, once one joins the sustainable metaverse, can a coach be assigned to them individually to help them navigate, especially in its early stages? Some might hold some trepidation when, and then I get there with some more to that and just kind of trailed off, but I'll just answer that question directly. So a big thing about everything that you're doing, right, is scalability. So imagine if you have 30,000 members and you assign one person to all 30,000, you would have to have 30,000 on one side, right? Even just if you sign one person to every 100 people, you need a certain amount of people on that side to be able to do that. And so what we've began in that venture is actually soul coaching and ambassador training, because an ambassador is what it says. It's a representative of the platform, or those that are coming in to learn how to represent the platform. And ambassador training has been up for, it's like 8 or 9 years now. And so what happens is that our next stage is actually allowing the process of integration, especially for, let's say, the 0 user versus the 1 user, to just be more fluid. What we've done is we began to integrate what we call element tribes, where it meets a person exactly where they are, because we also realize everybody's not at the same space. Some are just coming for the high levels of spiritual knowledge. Some are coming for the spiritual growth. Spirit for me, right? Some are coming for the financial growth or the health, right? And some are also just beginning. So they're like, okay, I need to start from scratch. And then others are coming in to eventually do what I do, like communicate and really see how far they can really dive into their uniqueness and become orators of a truth. And so because of that, we've developed all those modules, and that's where we test that is in ambassador training. And then eventually as we scale, that's what we will begin to deploy, because that's what scalability is. It then allows us to say, okay, well, now we can actually assign this or grow this per capita within inside of the network without, tilting over something else. This next question is will your NFTs be deployed on Polygon or Ethereum, and will it be a ERC 721? As I mentioned in the white paper, the contract is actually ERC 721A. It's another one of those angels dropping down out of the sky. For those that know that, obviously minting on Ethereum is extremely expensive. This is revolutionizing that space. Polygon. Okay, so when we were seeking mentorship about what protocol we should launch on, it was quite interesting. We found that certain projects work really, really well on certain chains. So I don't doubt at all that humanitarian efforts that are strictly humanitarian, DAO-based stuff works really well on Polygon, because it actually is, there's almost no fees, and there's a lot of communities like that inside of Polygon. However, it kind of develops the term, the poor man's blockchain, not to bag on it a little bit, but everyone knows that you can mint on Polygon for almost nothing. So what we wanted to do was, because there's a lot of prestige around the Warriors of Love project, there was already a large venture, not only within the time and attention that was placed into the art, the conceptual design itself, everything around the project is just high level. So the last thing we wanted to do was kind of cheese out, because we wanted to go on to a blockchain that couldn't really support this project. So in the end, we decided to go with Ethereum. So we mint ERC 721A, and we're off and running to the races. So that answers your question. Okay. That person was also asking, let me know if I can lend a hand. I wish I had known you like 2 days ago, but I was at that final part, and the metadata there was like one error in the metadata, and boy, that was a trip for me. But I found that it was also very educating, because now I can actually do the process. And our big goal is that our actual marketplace is going to be used for NFTs for children, in a project where we're going to allow them to create NFTs with our diffusion models, and so that they can actually support themselves by being able to not only sell their art or their NFTs, but also to solidify their future with some royalties, right? So we're thinking big time when we're utilizing these technologies, and that kind of meant that I needed to understand how to really mint this contract myself and the ins and outs of it. But I would gladly pass it off to somebody else now. This question is, when purchasing the WOL NFT, what wallets are and where will the NFT be sent to the buyer? And what does the investor need to have on set before purchase to receive the NFT? And so in this case, all you need is an Ethereum address. When you go whitelist, you'll put that address inside of the whitelist form. And then when we whitelist it, when you mint, that would be the only requirement, that you're minting from the wallet that you actually, that you whitelisted. So it's as easy as that. Also, we do have live support around us. So if at any point it gets confusing, because we know it can be, just hit us up and we should be able to assist you in the process. The next question is, what is available to assist? And again, that would be 3 days before August 22nd. Yes. Like, there's no reason in contacting us now, because that would be 3 days before August 22nd that we're going to open up a private sale of the NFTs before they go public. I know Sean's like, okay, thank you so much, and save me in support. Save us all in support. What is available to assist us on our journey through your website for free and as a starting tool as we build trust before we join the program? And can you explain on Eneology? Everything, pretty much. The reality of Secret Energy is that it's not what we would say is only a paid network. There's tiers to it. And what we found out, though, and it was kind of a big shock to me, is that when you give everything away for free, then somehow it's perceived as having no value. I can logically see how that happens, but it's almost like people start feeling like that you just have to be there, that you just have to give them something. And it is quite amazing, because generally, again, we find that people are not as forthcoming and giving with all of their assets and their time and their energy and their attention. They're generally just trying to get some money or whatever. This has been a really, really deep venture where we've put a lot of quality into what we're doing. So just to answer your question initially, pretty much everything that is available, such as Eneology, the knowledge on YouTube, et cetera, is free. And the only paywalls are within ambassador training and places like the store where there's a real transfer of energy that needs to be balanced out. Question, is it mandatory to participate in the different phases of the DAO in order to buy NFTs, and or participation is an opportunity to win an NFT as well? We decided that we weren't going to create this huge barrier to entry of all of these different hoops you needed to jump through to be able to get an NFT. I think that whole game is in itself just a game. It's like, okay, we're going to create exclusivity this way. You create exclusivity through utilities. You create exclusivity through real communities. There's other things that we have that create real exclusivity rather than this perceived idea that it's so hard to get this. You see what I mean? If you're here, you whitelist, when you're in that first 72 hours, you're going to be able to get an NFT. If you don't have the capital, you could go through the quest, do you, and if you end up, I believe it's in the top 3, then you get an NFT anyway. So it's that sliding scale of mindfulness that we're constantly dealing with. And we know, because if you read the white paper, we're holding, or we plan to hold 222 NFTs. So that means that there's actually less NFTs available than even in our initial mint. And this is only, of course, to drive up the value, but this is also we know that as we keep going forward in the future, we keep building more utilities. Those initial NFTs, they just increase in value. And so that means that if they're in the treasury just increases in value. So this question is are you designing how Secret Energy platform looks and feels like in a complete immersion in the 3D XR VR metaverse? This is interesting. Actually, Secret Energy is going through a transformation right now that is a new rendition. The only pages that are actually done, though, is the main page, the groups. Yeah, it's taken us that long because everything has been redesigned in React, especially. We've actually been using React for a while. We're planning on porting over soon to an app, but again, we're not trying to dive into Android or Apple stuff for a plethora of reasons. But just in our world, our final move with the design of Secret Energy is coming, and Secret Energy should be finally designed. Now, mind you, this is probably the 4th rendition of Secret Energy. So when we're saying it's going to be redesigned, this is already coming off of a pretty nice design. But for us, it's also, there's different things that we're noticing now, like certain colors and, distractions. And, when you have a lot of applications, you're trying to really file that in as much as possible without things becoming too busy. And so we're coming in, and we have come in on a whole different design, especially also the store, like making things more of so it's easy to find versus just, like nice widgets and products everywhere, but, not much cohesion that people can just think of intuitively. So there's a whole redesign in that realm. And what I'm going to do is as far as ventures in the future with metaverse stuff related to XR, VR, et cetera, is I'm sure that some have been seeing our diffusion model creations, this text to image. And by the way, we own a lot of assets around that already. It was just like something that I got to early. And it was just one of those stroke of lucks. And we were able to really gain a very strong, not only affiliation, but also on the internet, like a very strong presence in relation to text to image and artificial intelligence. And that's why we're embedding that as a creator utility here in a moment. But in that process, I mean, the possibilities are endless of what can really be done with art. And what I started, because I've been doing this also we're dealing with that particular industry, virtual reality and all that kind of stuff, just technology on that level. I've been in since DK1 and since the first development kits of just seeing what the potential is. I'm always looking at something to see, well, what is the potential of this? Can we turn on the chakra with it? And ultimately, what I believe is that for the imagination and also for mental health, virtual reality and potentially augmented reality can be useful to certain degrees, but it depends on what is the immersion. And right now, as you can see, most immersions are sometimes based on horror, monsters, they're doing their thing, but it's just like when you get out of that, maybe you don't increase the being that you are. So what we're looking at is actually bringing in some of these entire environments that we're deploying in the diffusion model, ray tracing a lot of that, and then extruding a lot of it, and then actually deploying these spaces that give you a heightened imagination and allow the eye to actually, it's like, okay, so for an artist, as you're looking at things over and over again, your eye develops differently. It's really a phenomenon that occurs, like colors and things start to become more apparent. Then when you look at the reality, you're able to see the art in reality, the design, the style, the contrast, and nature, these kind of things. And so also for people who don't have access to that kind of stuff, maybe you are trapped in the tenements or something, this is a window into a vista or a world that may inspire you to get off the block and actually go and do something and then get and escape a vicious cycle, right? And so that's what we're venturing into even now. Like we're in negotiation with understanding how to build certain things that allow us to be able to transpose some of this stuff into VR. So that's where we're at. Now, will that become like how people see the metaverse, where you're kind of plugging in and you got your own avatar and things like that? I'm not sure. I'm not as sure as if that's as wholesome from a time consumption level, and what those engagements look like and how to manage those engagements. This is just something that's constantly discussed in relation to VR and AR, especially in relation to inviting children into VR, AR, is, managing those environments properly so that they become instructive. Because what has been already discovered is the impact of virtual reality is about 4 to 7 times more in anything. So if a person gets scared in virtual reality, it's going to be 4 to 7 times stronger, that fear, than if they saw that on TV. Just so you can get an idea of some of the numbers that are coming across about the impacts of virtual reality. Also, it's been discovered that for a person who has gone through a lot of physical abuse, even PTSD, that there is a higher recovery rate and a more rapid recovery rate by bringing them into virtual environments that are configured to allow them to heal and go through those experiences. So again, anything that has a lot of power, you're always going to find there's 2 different sides. And what we're interested in is always finding the middle point. So the next question here is, and I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Let me see, okay. Are there bounty opportunities available? I would like to contribute to the build. I would ping us and let us know like exactly what you're referring to in relation to that, because there's a lot of classifications of bounties and what they can consist of. And yeah, if we hear something, because we're still not right at the launch, if we hear something that may be entertaining, we may entertain it. There's a question here that says, I have a ton of NFTs and I would like to publish with your platform. Talk to me. Again, as I said, because there are giants, like even when we decided to become a social network, it wasn't because we wanted to compete with Facebook or Instagram. It was because we had a lot of members and we were trying to figure out where to put everybody as far as this place that everybody can have their own profile. And that meant social network. So in this case, when we're thinking about NFT platform and marketplace, we are always pushing time and attention into things that we know are going to work. It is really good to be first. So in our world, that's really what the direction that we're going to be going in, is to actually have an NFT marketplace for our creators so that they can present what they create to those that are actually inside of our ecosystem. And then also we would want a use case in that marketplace for our own token. So that way, when users have our token, they can actually even purchase what is in that marketplace with that token. What the blockchain does allow is that now the gateway is open for a person to also take that and turning into Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then, as you know, you could take those and actually transfer them anywhere else. So that's the benefits that we want to use versus kind of just creating a space where there's going to be a lot of things that are generated in it that maybe it's like it starts to dilute what we're all about anyway, right? So that's the answer to that question. Will there be an assigned rarity rankings to your collection? Absolutely. It is in the white paper. It actually lets you know that there are 16 traits. There are 53 attributes. And there are a minimal number of traits is 9. So that means that if you take 16 from 9, then you're already able to see how many traits are actually already excluded from different NFTs. So for sure there is a ultra rare. And that also brings me to something, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier. It is in the NFT tokenomics here. And it's just that, so at the end of the collection, so this is 900 so there's number 1, and then there's 981 to 1,000. Okay, so number 1, if you notice on our OpenSea, has been minted on our side. We kind of minted number 2, but that was the contract thing. But number 1 is there, and number 1 is an ultra rare NFT. And when we go live, that ultra rare NFT is, we're working on basically getting the floor to 13 ETH. We're crossing our fingers on this. But it will always remain there until it reaches its value to set what we call the ceiling. Okay. And then at the end of the collection, we have 20 ultra rare. Okay, so excuse me, I don't want to confuse the terms here. You have super rare and you have ultra rare. Okay, I know. And I was like, okay, so which one is more? Ultra in this case is more. So there's one ultra rare, which is the number 1 NFT inside the collection, which is there, but it's hidden on OpenSea. And then at the end of the collection, there are 20 super rare NFTs. And these super rare NFTs are holding a cuboctahedron in their hand also. And that's also a signifier that anybody who has that NFT, and also any NFT that is minted that is holding a cuboctahedron, I think there's like 5, that you will get an in real life cuboctahedron. So also at the end of the collection, if you happen to be one of the people who purchased the last 20, if we make it to that point, then you're basically guaranteeing that you're going to buy a super rare, and you're guaranteeing that you're going to buy an IRL. And so that's kind of like the big Easter egg at the end of the minting process. And as I said before, as it says in our tokenomics, if we don't reach that stage, then all that just goes into the treasury, including the 20 super rare, and then maybe we'll list them at some point in the future based on proposals. So let me just keep with the questions here. It looks like we're almost completing or almost finished. Okay. Some say, in the Secret Energy store, there's a couple months ago, I saw the Vector Equilibrium and the Cosmic Clock for sale, and I joined the waiting list for purchase. And I remember seeing that this purchase was the prerequisite to purchase NFTs and filled in the form to whitelist for the Ethereum. Did I need to fill out the form on the white paper to be whitelisted again? Okay, so what we realized is especially with these new creations, which again is the Vector Equilibrium and the Cosmic Clock, by the way, this is nice stuff. Like I put this together with my own hands. Like we're milling from single pieces of red heart wood. We're polishing the brass by hand. We're embedding the elements. So this is a real craft of actually putting these objects together. And so we realized we can't put 10,000 of these together, 1,000 of these together right now. We only have a certain amount. In fact, there's 30. And so what we decided to do was, instead of launching it as a product on the store, is that we would launch it as an initial exclusive product in relation to the NFTs first. And those are registered the proper way. The actual device itself has a serial number inside of it. And you can check the registry of that particular one was an NFT, and you will also see the hash, or basically the receipt of that NFT. And so what that means is that for that collection of the 20, they are registered not only as NFTs, but also in the Spirit Check device directory. When we finally launch these products on the store, which we don't really know when it's going to happen, because there's only 30 right now, and that means we have to create more and all that before. So we just have enough to fill the current demand. Once we start to be able to generate more, those will also they will have serial numbers, but they will not be NFTs. So just to make that clear. And if you have already whitelisted, the whitelist exists since I think 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So it will be able to be used, what you put in there now, to actually purchase an NFT. So I guess in conclusion, no, you do not need to purchase an NFT to be able to purchase a vector equilibrium or a cosmic clock. It's surely the matter of being able to meet the demand of those who have who want those. And I think there's about 60 people on the waiting list for vector equilibriums. And that has nothing to do with the NFTs, right? And we're going to launch the NFTs first. So the first 20 of them, there's also, I think it's like 6 or 7 of them inside the deck. Those are already going to go to the people that are there. And then we need to generate more. So yeah, so we wanted to basically, there's a little scarcity around this. And that kind of brings me to somewhat of the end of my conversation. I know there's a few other questions here, and I'll take a look. But, at this point, you would have to realize that for us, since you're 14, that it's more about value and legacy now than it is about many other things that it was about early in this, because we accomplished that already. Now it's about, again, having something that's valuable for our children, especially in the future, and for this organization and what's being created here, and also our co-creators and everybody as a part of the tribe. So in that, we like to bring value and consider value in what we're doing. So that's why we didn't mint 10,000 NFTs. We could have. We have another collection that we could have also minted simultaneously. We didn't do that. So really, we're more of like, let's obey all the rules of creating scarcity, rarity, and those kind of things. And we'll do the same thing when we launch our token. And that way, in many ways, especially for the first adopters, then their growth will be at such a stage. You got to be careful of what you're saying here, but their growth will be at such a stage, it won't ever feel like to them, whether the charts are moving up or down, that they didn't get involved in a great venture. But that has a lot to do with tokenomics, and it has a lot to do with the decisions that founders are making, if whether or not it's just a money grab for them, or if they're really in it for the long haul and they actually do want to create something that others are really saying, wow, it's 20 years later and this is continuing to increase in value, versus it's only 20 days later and this thing is like at zero already. So just being mindful of that. Somebody's asking if they can convert their ohms to buying NFTs, and the answer to that is no. And that is because ohms is a private protocol, so it is not on a public blockchain. So there is no way for us to translate ohms into anything on the blockchain, nor will there be, because that actually would produce some legal scenarios. So for us, when we do create a token that can work on the blockchain, it will be a part of Creator DAO and the Secret Energy Foundation. Hopefully that happens sooner than later. But as you know, ohms, other than that, is convertible for anything inside of the store. And in the future, you will also be able to gift ohms to those who are participating in the live streaming on the platform. The next question is, we're kind of beyond the second question. There's only 4 more questions here, by the way, for those who are wanting to know when we will adjourn, if you want to catch this to the end. What support do you need right now in respect to managing the DAO? Strategic advisory, ideation, execution. We're building a synergistic Web3 ecosystem with a core focus of elevating consciousness and securing ancient wisdom and IP on the blockchain. Nice. And we're iterating fast as we ramp up for our launch, and we'll be honored to contribute to Secret to the energy, learnings, ideas, and exploration partnerships to support Creator DAO. If in alignment, appreciate what you're building here and looking forward to participating further. Wholeness. Thank you so much for sending that in. What support do we need right now in respect to managing the DAO? So where we're at right now is we're actually creating councils. We looked inside of Secret Energy itself and we decided, okay, well, if we're going to start decentralizing some of this, let's start with some of the core fundamentals to how we function. And even those who are the liaisons of how we function, let's get others in the community. That's why we have actually NFTs that we're going to be airdropping to certain community members, so that they will have the ability to set the ground floor for our governance model. Because from my instructors, what they talked about is that you're not only trying to not get hacked by hackers, you're also trying to not get your community hacked when you move on to the blockchain. And what a community hack is that if you don't really state your ideals and the core fundamentals to how everything is functioning, and let's say midstream or early in the beginning, you start taking on too many people who don't also understand those ideals, then your whole project can actually crash anyway, because the value is still built within these non-fungible tokens and these tokens. And so That's why we started moving more into educating first, and basically taking a breath for a moment, taking it slow and saying, hey, so how does it need to look over here and what needs to be designed over here for this really to work, rather than launching it and then figuring out later what it's going to take to make it work. I know there's a lot of wishful thinking, there's a lot of positivity, and there's a lot of bright ideals, but man, when it doesn't work, nobody cares anything about that. And I was like, man, I'm definitely not trying to participate in something to where, you kind of getting that energy from everyone. So how can we foolproof this as much as possible? And so right now, if I was to say what kind of assistance did we need with our DAO, I would say that there's other ramifications to a DAO, such as its legal structure and investigation more in that arena. Council forming. Obviously, we have to appoint certain councils initially. We will have to grant them NFT access, but in the future, those councils will eventually be voted for. So it's that same structure that you would get inside of any infrastructure to this level that would actually be looking to go horizontal. And so if I could say that we need anything, because I think over the last few months, we've kind of had to meet a lot of those needs just to launch the actual project, it would be just that kind of cohesiveness between tribe members and engagements within the structures that we're actually building, to be able to test those structures so that they work. Because ultimately what Secret Energy and Creator DAO, the foundation, is looking to do is really open source what we're developing. That's why we're more interested at this stage in the technology, basically creating dApps and Web3 applications that implement Toyota economies. And that's really what our developers are actually working on. Because then when we have that, we can then grant it to another community, and that they can also then just bolt that on or bootstrap it and begin to use that system within their ecosystem. And then that also gives us a utility, especially if there's any kind of fees that are associated with such applications. And so that's where we're at. I would definitely reach. I think I know who also answered this question, because the eloquent speech is quite easy to notice. But definitely reach in to me directly, and we'll see how we can collaborate, because obviously all the projects on the DAO are really about collaboration, and that's what actually allows these things to grow. A couple more questions here. Is there a way that we can use or our Coinbase wallet to buy? Yeah, Coinbase actually has a Ethereum integration that you can use there, and they also support NFT airdrops. I do have one clause to that, make sure that it's the Coinbase private wallet, not just Coinbase itself, because that will affect who's actually holding the NFT. So just make sure you clarify that you have the Coinbase private wallet application, which is different than the Coinbase wallets that you're using there. If you need any more clarification on that, then I would reach out to support or reach in. What are the practical applications for NFTs? Sorry if this has been answered. It has. Actually, initially, we discussed heavily how NFTs are more than just JPEGs, and how they are instruments that assist in not only awarding those that are actually inside of the ecosystem with real power of governance, but also to have an integer that the value is placed in. So the more everybody's about this, the more everybody is actually doing what they have pledged to do, which is really just hold the value. I mean, to be honest, projects tank because they take on investors that are not interested in the project. And when it starts dumping, somebody sells all the coins or the tokens or whatever. But if everybody holds, the scarcity or the squeeze happens, and it just keeps increasing the value because it becomes more and more rare. But again, we will want to be more aggressive at how we make sure that rarity actually happens. And that's the whole thing around the NFT space, is rarity and exclusivity, but you have to build that in the tokenomics. So the tokenomics that you're actually looking at is giving you an idea of how you would incorporate that into the tokenomics, but also the platform that you're looking at and the different assets that it has will let you know how it could actually create some type of value within the utility. Also, there's a community here already. There's a question here. It's almost the final one. Will you make a video on the new tools that were made the Vector Equilibrium and the Cosmic Watch? I can't say those are actually new tools. Those are some of these tools I've had for a while, like some of my 3D mills and different machines that I have. I will for sure do, as one of our presentations is actually about spiritual technology. And we're going to kind of do a quasi reveal of the technology. I'm going to explain the technology and how it works. As far as the creation process, I kind of feel like that you do have to be on point with trade secrets these days. I have had the rug kind of snatched right underneath me on my own projects of things that I've mentioned. And somebody just went and kind of took the idea before I can even implement it. So I am a bit cautious about showing too much. And I think that's just anybody who's working on stuff in the technological space right now just already knows that the people who steal your stuff don't even have the heart to show up to your meetings, right? So the last question here is, can you elaborate a little about how these systems and NFTs relate to the AI utility? So at the end of the day, we find the utilities with artificial intelligence or diffusion models to be very disruptive, meaning it's pretty much going to hit the world like a storm. It's already started. It's just something that's happening in a small sector. It's not just the art as people are seeing now, because that is the most, I would believe right now, the most applicable direct thing that people can see the bump in. But remember, this happened in Go, it happened in chess. It's happening at the Amazon factory. It's happening at the Tesla factory, meaning that the artificial intelligence tools and models that have been trained properly can really do a lot of heavy lifting in arenas that we're not interested in, and it brings us closer to that finish or final goal. So for instance, if you're going to do a book, it's still going to take you, if you're going to illustrate it, some time to illustrate that book. Let's say roughly it takes 6 months to properly illustrate a book. Let's just throw a number out here. With us doing that with a diffusion model, it could take about 2 weeks. Maybe even less, max 1 month. So you can imagine then how much more time is gained for the author, especially with bringing the book to market, decreasing the barrier to entry. And this is just one example. There's other applications within artificial intelligence that have other implications and other things that they can actually do. So where we're at is we're just like, okay, well, here's another big disruptive thing. It's just like cryptocurrency was. Everybody thinks it's the devil. And now what we have to do is to figure out for our tribe how we're going to carve out a space in that arena. Right. And so that's what we do. And we're seeing quite a few things can easily do this, like can easily be done by AI, such that we've been playing around with cymatics for a while. And we've noticed that, when you're just trying to compute cymatic in real time with normal systems, it just takes way too much processing power. But when you have AI do it, it's almost no processing power. So there's so many different things. And then ultimately, because of course, I got somewhat of a head on my shoulder, so I'm not just trying to create things that feed the money monster, meaning that, you create a software, everything's in fiat. So when it gets sold, it goes into that same fiat system. Everybody basically gets taxed for every time somebody buys it. And it's just kind of like a drain to even the initial product itself. Versus if it's in our own economy and people can use it or deploy it with our own token, then now we have a use case. So when you have people coming out that just realize how advanced some of this stuff is, and we've already deployed it, as I said, we're deploying stuff now and testing it. And then we bring that to the user and we say, or to the end user. And we say to the end user, hey, here's now a diffusion model that you can use to generate your own books, even the text, based on prompts. It costs X to use this. That X is a utility for us, meaning that is something that somebody is then paying for, and then that money is going into the DAO and it's increasing the treasury. And then what that's doing is giving us more resource to keep going forward and to keep developing and to keep creating. And as you know that, well, maybe you don't know, but our overall objective is we see land as a big proponent to the future. We're actually based in Costa Rica. Obviously, there's an immense natural environment here. I mean, there's one of the world's only blue zones here. I actually live not too far from it. And just being in the land, I've been here for 10 years. So just being in the land and seeing the value in land and, the trees, the waterfalls, the birds, you name it. I mean, it's here and it has a priceless value. We have been really thinking in our minds to grab up thousands of hectares and to begin to actually build this smart city. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I don't want us on this team to also get ahead of ourselves, because sometimes you can just be thinking about the future and not really be too zoomed in on the present and miss your opportunity. But that is our vision here. And that is also inside of parts of the white paper, if you take time to actually read it, to where we're, again, in legacy phase of thinking about like what is going to be able to survive the test of time. So I trust that that makes sense for everyone. I want to give thanks to everybody that has had the opportunity to participate today in this explanation of the Secret Energy Foundation and Creator DAO, and then also just a brief overview of Secret Energy and its history and her story and exactly what it's been creating and what it plans to do in the future. I trust that if you grab the associated links that were sent, that you'll be able to have opportunity to participate in this project, and that you'll actually see what you see here as being extremely valuable to carving out not only the future for yourself, but also for your children. Thank you so much. Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations. I'll talk to everyone soon in the next build, which again, if you subscribe to Luma, then you'll actually know when we're jumping on again. I think it's the launch. So get ready. It's the 22nd, July 22nd. You know, I got so many dates. They were like, you gave the wrong date. So let me double check. You know, there's no rush. Fools rush in. So we have the start of the quest. Yes, July 22nd. What we'll do at that stage is we'll actually kind of give a rundown of the quest. What are the items that can be won? Like how to track everything, how to get into the Discord. So we're going to do all that on the 22nd. And then I think we're launching in that afternoon. So, but it is on the 22nd, but we got to kind of give everybody opportunity to get acclimated to what's going on. And also, we hope that everybody starts at the same time. While there's incentives for you to win tickets along the way, obviously those who go through as many of the actionables as possible will increase their opportunity to actually win. And then also, it's not just about winning inside of these actionables. There's education in there. And then there's also assisting us with the process of bringing more awareness to the project itself. So I trust that you realize how valuable that is to us. And then I trust that you realize how valuable you are to yourself. Wholeness. Thank you so much.